Imagine this, 40 years of raising two sons, two grown-ass men, 40 and 42, thinking they were mine, supporting them through every mess and triumph, only to have my world shattered in one surreal, gut-wrenching moment. It started on an ordinary day that turned into a nightmare I couldn't have foreseen. I was sitting in my doctor's office, waiting for news about my brother's kidney transplant, when the nurse's smile slowly drained away, and the doctor's eyes grew heavy with a secret. "Sir," he began hesitantly, "we ran the tests twice. Your sons, they're not biologically yours." I almost choked on my coffee. Not mine. Not after all those years of unconditional support, the sleepless nights, the unending sacrifices. I thought I knew every inch of their story, believed they took after the woman who bore them. But apparently, those theories were nothing more than desperate guesses, because the truth was far stranger. They were children of someone else, a plumber, a mailman, or maybe even both, and that was just the beginning. I remember the shock as if it were yesterday. I had always been proud, despite their relentless, infuriating ways. They were my little bastards, as I jokingly called them, though deep down I loved them like my own flesh and blood. Every scraped knee, every ruined school project, every wild teenage escapade, I'd been there, my heart swelling with a mix of exasperation and fierce pride. But that day in the sterile white office, armed with test results and a truth too bizarre to comprehend, everything fell apart. I left that appointment numb, my mind spinning as I tried to piece together a past that suddenly didn't belong to me. How could I have been so blind? I replayed every memory, the way they laughed at my jokes, the fierce loyalty in their eyes, the way they'd always defended me against the world. None of it could explain this mystery of biology, of secrets whispered behind closed doors. As I trudged home, my mind was a whirlwind of anger and disbelief. I thought about their mother, the woman who had given me 43 years of marriage, the one I'd trusted with every piece of my heart. I remembered the soft hum of her voice in the mornings, the gentle way she'd smile even on the worst days, and the secretive glances exchanged with strangers that I had brushed off as quirks of an independent woman. But now, in the light of this revelation, her entire existence came into question. I knew she'd been a wild spirit, a free soul who didn't fit the conventional mold, but I never suspected she'd played me for a fool. Could it be that all those times I felt a chill down my spine? The moments when I caught her phone screen lighting up with messages from unknown names were the first whispers of betrayal? I confronted her that night. The living room was dimly lit, the silence heavy with unspoken truths. I looked at her and said, "Who are they really, huh? Who did you think I wouldn't find out about?" Her eyes, which I had once trusted, now flashed with something I couldn't quite decipher. Fear, guilt, or perhaps defiance. She sighed deeply, almost as if she had been waiting for this moment. "Which one do you mean?" she replied, her tone cool, almost rehearsed. I pressed further, recounting every detail of that fateful day at the doctor's office, every whispered doubt, and every unreturned smile. The tension in the room was palpable, our shared past crumbling in the wake of hard, undeniable facts. In the days that followed, the house turned into a maze of secrets and half-truths. Every time I walked past the hallway where family photos hung, I saw images of smiling faces that now felt like lies. I started investigating on my own, sifting through old letters, bank statements, and even scouring the internet for any clues that might explain the puzzle of my so-called sons. The deeper I dug, the murkier the waters became. There were hints of a double life, names I didn't recognize, transactions to offshore accounts, and mysterious absences during family gatherings. It wasn't just about the boys, it was about the woman I thought I knew, the wife I had built a life with. I recalled a night, years ago, when I had stayed up waiting for her to come home. The clock had ticked past midnight, and instead of her familiar footsteps, there were only the distant hums of the city. I'd wondered if she was meeting someone, if perhaps she had found solace in the arms of another. But back then, I dismissed it as nothing more than a fleeting moment, a misunderstanding that could be explained away with a simple, "I lost track of time." Now those memories were imbued with a sinister significance. Each time I'd excused her late nights or brushed off her vague explanations, I'd been weaving a web of denial around my own heart. And now, that web was unraveling. One particularly bitter evening, when the rain tapped incessantly against the windows and the wind howled like a beast outside, I decided to confront her one more time. I needed the truth, raw and unfiltered. "Tell me everything," I demanded, my voice breaking through the silence like a whip. "Don't leave out a single detail. About the tests, about the boys, about you." She sat there for a long moment, eyes downcast, before finally speaking in a voice so soft it almost got lost in the storm. "I never wanted you to find out this way," she murmured. "I was afraid that if you knew the truth, you'd leave, that you'd never forgive me." Her confession hit me like a ton of bricks. I listened, heart pounding, as she recounted the story of her younger days, the reckless decisions that had led her to betray the sanctity of our marriage. It turned out that before I even knew her as my wife, she had been involved with a man whose name I'd never heard, a transient fling that spiraled into something far more complicated. And then there were whispers of other affairs, fleeting encounters with men who'd left their mark on her in more ways than one. Each revelation was a shard of broken glass in my chest, cutting deeper than any physical wound. But as she spoke, I began to see a different picture, a picture of a woman torn between her past and her present, desperate to salvage a life that was slipping through her fingers. I could sense the remorse in her tone, the silent pleading for forgiveness, and yet, a part of me could never forget the betrayal. The revelation about the boys, that they weren't mine, was the final, crushing blow. It wasn't just the deception about their biological origins, it was the realization that every moment of pride, every sacrifice I'd made, had been built on a foundation of lies. I spent sleepless nights pacing the floor, grappling with the newfound truth. I wandered through memories of family vacations, birthdays, and holidays, each one now tainted with doubt and sorrow. My mind was a relentless storm of anger, betrayal, and a desperate need for answers. Couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, I'd been the victim of an elaborate con, a masterful deception orchestrated by the one person I loved most. The turning point came one gloomy afternoon when I decided to confront my past head-on. I sat in the garage, surrounded by relics of a life I thought I knew, a dusty baseball glove, faded photographs of us us smiling in front of a picket fence, and a tattered jacket that once belonged to me. The silence was deafening, filled with memories of laughter and love, now mixed with the bitter taste of betrayal. I realized that I had two choices. I could either let this truth destroy me, or I could use it to rebuild a more honest, authentic life. It wasn't an easy choice. It felt like the earth had been ripped out from beneath me, leaving me stranded in a void of uncertainty. As I wrestled with my inner demons, the news about my son's true paternity continued to gnaw at me. I reached out to a genetic counselor, someone who could help me piece together the puzzle of my family's history. The counselor's calm, professional demeanor did little to soothe the turbulent emotions raging inside me. It's not uncommon, she explained, for families to have secrets like this, especially when there are multiple lives intertwined. Sometimes, the truth is messy and complicated. Her words offered little comfort. Instead, they only confirmed that my life was nothing like the picture-perfect family I had believed in all these years. Driven by a desperate need for closure, I started tracing the footsteps of my son's biological lineage. I contacted old acquaintances, delved into records, and even hired a private investigator. The investigator, a grizzled man with more scars than years, took one look at the situation and said, "You're in for one hell of a ride." And ride we did, through a labyrinth of half-truths and hidden affairs. Every lead uncovered a new layer of deception, each more jaw-dropping than the last. There were rumors of clandestine meetings, secret bank accounts, and even whispers of a mysterious benefactor who had somehow managed to keep these affairs under wraps for decades. Amid this chaos, my relationship with my wife reached a breaking point. Late-night arguments turned into bitter confrontations, where words were thrown like daggers. I demanded answers, and she offered only vague, contradictory statements that left me more confused than ever. "You think I wanted to hurt you?" she'd cry, tears streaming down her face. "I did it all because I was lost, because I thought I could have it all. And now, look where we are." I wanted to scream, to shout that I was the one who was betrayed, that I had given everything for this family, only to have it all ripped away by lies and infidelity. One particularly searing night, after one of our explosive arguments, I stormed out of the house. The rain was coming down in sheets, and the cold wind cut through me like a knife. I wandered the empty streets, the neon lights of the city blurring into a kaleidoscope of memories. In a rundown diner, I sat alone at the counter, nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, and wondered how everything had spiraled so far out of control. It was in that moment of solitude that I realized something vital. The truth, as painful as it was a form of liberation. Yes, I had been deceived. Yes, the woman I loved had betrayed me. And yes, the boys I'd raised were not my own. But in that raw, unfiltered truth lay the opportunity to rebuild my life on a foundation that was real, however painful it might be. Returning home that night, soaked and shivering, I felt a strange calm wash over me. I knew that I couldn't change the past, that the years of deception were irretrievable, but I also understood that the future was still unwritten, that I held the pen to my own destiny. I resolved to confront the chaos head-on, to extract every last shred of honesty from the tangled web of lies that had defined my existence. The next morning, with a renewed sense of purpose, I sat down with my wife one final time. "We're done dancing around the truth," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "It's time for everything to come out into the open." What followed was a marathon of revelations. My wife confessed to every sordid detail of her past, the names, the dates, the hidden rendezvous that had defined her reckless youth. She admitted that when she had met me, she was already entangled in a web of liaisons, that she had thought she could keep those parts of her life separate from our marriage. But secrets have a way of surfacing, and now, after decades of denial, they were crashing down like waves against a crumbling shore. Each confession was a painful reminder of what we had lost, of the trust that had been so brutally shattered. As she spoke, I felt a cocktail of emotions swirling within me: anger, grief, and a strange sense of relief that the weight of deception was finally lifting. I listened in silence, each word etching itself into my memory, until she finally fell silent, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words almost lost in the soft hum of the morning. But I couldn't find it in me to forgive her. Not yet, not ever. The wound was too deep, the betrayal too raw. Yet, amid the devastation, there was a flicker of something unexpected: understanding. I began to see that, in her own warped way, she had been a victim of her circumstances, product of choices made long before I ever stepped into her life. It wasn't that I condoned her actions. I simply recognized that our lives were not as clear-cut as I had once believed. The truth was messy, complicated, and far beyond the simple notions of right and wrong that I'd clung to for so long. In the weeks that followed, I embarked on a journey of self-discovery. I met with old friends and family members, each conversation peeling back another layer of the past. I revisited memories of childhood, of a time when life was simpler and the future was full of promise. I even found myself laughing at the absurdity of it all. The cosmic joke of raising sons who weren't biologically mine, the irony of loving a woman who had built her life on secrets. And with every conversation, every revelation, I started to understand that the truth, as painful as it was, had freed me from the illusions I had clung to for so long. But just as I began to feel that perhaps there was a path forward, a glimmer of redemption in the chaos, the past reared its head one final time. One fateful evening, as I sat alone in the darkened living room, a package arrived at the door. No return address, no note, just a plain brown box. With trembling hands, I opened it, half expecting to find more evidence of a life I'd been forced to live. Instead, inside the box was a small weathered envelope and a faded photograph. The photo was of two young boys, smiling innocently, standing in front of an old brick building. There was something hauntingly familiar about their eyes, a spark that reminded me of the sons I'd raised. The envelope contained a single note, written in shaky handwriting: "The truth isn't always what you expect. Look deeper." I felt my heart hammering in my chest as I examined the photograph. Could it be that there was another chapter to this story, a hidden piece of the puzzle that I'd overlooked all these years? My mind raced with possibilities. Was it a clue to their real origin? Or perhaps a final cruel twist of fate meant to torment me further? I spent the rest of the night poring over every detail, cross-referencing old documents and rereading every conversation conversation I'd had with my wife, every scrap of evidence pointed to one disturbing conclusion. There was another man. Someone who had been involved in this charade from the very beginning. The realization hit me like a freight train. All these years, while I had been caught in the whirlwind of betrayal and deception, the truth had been hiding in plain sight. The boys, the woman I loved, even the very foundation of our family. Everything was part of a complex, interwoven tapestry of secrets that spanned decades. And as I stared at that faded photograph, a chill ran down my spine. In that moment, I knew that the journey was far from over. There were still questions that needed answers, mysteries that begged to be unraveled. I spent the following months chasing down every lead, following the trail of breadcrumbs that wound its way through a maze of past lives and hidden relationships. I discovered that my wife had maintained contact with someone from her earlier days, a man who had always lurked in the shadows, a ghost from a life she'd long since abandoned. I learned that the man was, in fact, the biological father of my so-called sons. The realization was both damning and oddly liberating. Here was the final piece of the puzzle, the truth that I had been avoiding, the secret that had haunted my every step. It wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about accepting that life was messy and unpredictable, full of unexpected twists that left you reeling in the aftermath. The confrontation that followed was as intense as it was cathartic. One evening, as the rain pounded against the windows and the house seemed to groan under the weight of all that had transpired, I sat down with her one last time. "I know everything now," I said, my voice a mix of resignation and determination. "I know about him, about the boys, about every lie you told me." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a long moment, there was nothing but the sound of our breathing and the relentless drumming of the rain. "I'm sorry," she repeated, her voice barely audible. "I was lost, and I didn't know how to fix things." I looked at her, the woman who had once been my rock, and realized that forgiveness wasn't something that came easily. It wasn't about erasing the past, but about finding a way to live with it, to learn from it and move on. In that quiet, stormy moment, as the final vestiges of our shattered marriage lay bare before us, I understood something profound. Life is not a neat, orderly narrative. It's a swirling mass of contradictions, of beauty and brutality intertwined. The betrayal, the deception, the endless cascade of secrets. It all coexisted with moments of genuine love, of unexpected kindness, of growth. And as painful as it was to accept, sometimes the truth, no matter how harsh, sets you free. The resolution came not as a grand epiphany, but as a slow, steady acceptance. I decided that from this point forward, I would live for myself. I would honor the years I'd spent raising those boys, who, despite everything, had taught me more about unconditional love than I ever imagined. And I would confront the woman I once loved with compassion, even if I couldn't fully forgive her. We parted ways quietly, each of us burdened with memories too heavy to erase, but also with the hope of finding redemption in our separate paths. And then, on one bright, unexpected morning, as the first light of dawn broke through the remnants of a long, stormy night, I received one final message, a short text on my phone, unsigned and cryptic. "Truth isn't over yet. There's one more secret waiting to be unveiled." I stared at the screen, heart pounding with a mixture of dread and anticipation, knowing that the story I thought had reached its end was about to take one final, mind-bending twist. I embarked on that last journey with a mixture of trepidation and resolve, following the clues hidden in dusty corners of old records and whispered conversations with those who'd known her in her earlier days. Every step brought me closer to a final confrontation with the man who had been the ghost in our lives all along. The meeting was set in a quiet, dimly lit diner on the edge of town, a place that smelled of stale coffee and forgotten memories. I sat in a booth, my nerves on edge, until a figure appeared at the door. He was unassuming, his face nondescript, yet as our eyes met, I saw in them the answer to years of unanswered questions. For a long, agonizing moment, the world seemed to stand still. The man didn't speak immediately. He just sat across from me, his gaze steady and calm. Finally, in a voice as rough as gravel, he said, "I've been waiting for it." That single sentence carried the weight of decades of secrets, the burden of lies that had defined my entire life. In that moment, I realized that the story, my story, had come full circle. The betrayal wasn't just about one woman or one man. It was about every moment of denial, and every truth that had been buried beneath layers of deception. I looked at him, feeling the rush of every emotion I had suppressed for so long. Anger, sorrow, resignation, and even a strange sense of relief. And then, as if guided by fate, I asked the question that had haunted me for years. Why? He leaned in, his eyes glinting with an unreadable emotion, and for a heartbeat the universe seemed to pause. Then he spoke softly, the words tumbling out like a confession. "Because I loved her. And because sometimes, love isn't enough to erase the mistakes of the past." In that moment, the full scope of our tangled lives came crashing down. I realized that the truth was never black and white, that our lives were painted in shades of gray, each one telling a story of love, betrayal, and ultimately, redemption. I left that diner with a heavy heart, but also with a newfound clarity. The journey had been long, winding through corridors of memory and deception, and though the wounds would never fully heal, they had transformed me. I was no longer the man who clung to a perfect image of family and loyalty. I was someone who had faced the darkest truths and emerged with a deeper understanding of life's inherent chaos. And in that understanding, I found a strange, bittersweet sense of peace. Now, as I sit here reflecting on it all, the echoes of the past still whisper in the quiet moments, reminding me that life is never as it seems. The deception, the betrayal, the unraveling of my family's fabric, it all served as a painful reminder that sometimes, the truth is a puzzle too complex to solve completely. Yet, in the midst of that complexity, there is a beauty in embracing every flawed, messy detail. I learned that the end of one chapter is just the beginning of another, that every revelation, no matter how devastating, carries the potential for growth. In the final analysis, The truth about my sons, my wife, and the tangled web of lies was not a tale of simple betrayal. It was a saga of human frailty, of the lengths we go to protect ourselves and those we love, even if it means sacrificing honesty along the way. And as I close this chapter, I'm left with one final thought that continues to echo in the depths of my soul. In the midst of chaos, sometimes the only way to move forward is to embrace the truth, however painful it may be, and use it as a stepping stone to a future built on genuine understanding and hard-won redemption. And then, as I sat there with the morning light streaming through my window and the weight of every secret pressing down on me, I realized with a final, shattering clarity, I finally understood what it all meant.